welcome back to another episode of the Kate Thurman Show, where we have real life conversation with real people. And today we have Miss Dawn Marie Westmoreland here with us. We are so excited to have her here. Dawn, welcome to the Kate Thurman Show.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Don, we said backstage, we don't do bios. I don't read bios here because I believe that no one can tell your story better than you can. Can you give us a little information about yourself?
Sure, I'll make it brief. I am 62 years old, living in Asheville, North Carolina, retired from the Air Force 21 years ago. I was a shy kid growing up, Kate. I was so shy, I didn't even go to the prom. And you and I were talking ahead of this interview about the prom.
Mhm.
I was terrified of the world, just circumstances that had happened to me, lots of bad experiences and trauma. And so, went into the Air Force, developed my voice, my strength, my discipline, and definitely my resilience.
Mhm.
And today, I do life coaching. I've been an HR consultant 33 years. Of course, I said I'm retired from the Air Force. I'm a resilience keynote speaker, and I write books on resilience and such. And because it is about transparency and being authentic, I've had counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists say, the things that you've been through, Dawn, would harm most people. And they would even, a lot of these people would commit suicide. And I'm like, wow, what makes me different? Because I certainly went through a lot of heartaches and hardships,
Mhm.
but I'm somebody that knows that there's a better way and a better life. And that always pushed me. That always pushed me. I didn't want to stay in the victimhood of what was going on.
Wow. Oh, that's good, Don. You mentioned you wrote the books on transparency, and I know that you talk a lot about being transparent. What made you want to be so open and transparent about your life?
Well, it's hard because I didn't have a voice, and I'll be putting out my memoir. That'll be my third book. I've, co-authored books and such. And, Silence Has a Tongue is probably going to be my title, more than likely. I know I've seen some Silence Has Spoken. As I said earlier, Kate, I'm the last person you think would be doing this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I decided that if I could open up, because I've always had to hold it together when I was in the Air Force 20 years, the last thing you ever do is become vulnerable because people
Right.
will just jump on you. It's a very aggressive, male oriented, I don't care if it's Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines. Of course,
Mhm.
the Marines could be more men than the Air Force.
Mhm.
I always held it inside, held it together, but I found out that I was spilling out the seams, all this extra energy, negative energy. And I knew I had to start talking about it. And I knew if I talked about, hey, this is my experience, going through sexual abuse as a child or bullying, that I gave voice to that subject matter and encourages people to be more open and transparent, because a lot of times we're filled with shame and guilt for things that have nothing to do. It's not our fault.
Right. Right. I love that. And I talk a lot about, I try to be as transparent as possible. And I talk a lot about, you know, silent and being silent. Did you ever have a moment where you thought you would never be able to use your voice? Because silence can keep us, can hold us hostage without us even realizing.
Yeah. Did ever, so let me make sure I have the question correct.
Mhm. So, did you ever have a moment where you felt like you wasn't going to really be able to break the silence, or did you think you were going to be silent forever? Like, when we're silent, right? And we feel like when we're going through it, we don't realize that we're just being silenced, and we don't know that we have that. The voice is loud once you break that silence.
Yes, yes. I remember going through some sexual abuse as a child, and I remember the man telling me, nobody's going to believe you.
Mm.
I'll hurt you, I'll harm you, if you ever speak up. And so, I was afraid. I was afraid of life. I was afraid of people. I never thought I had a voice. And when I went in the Air Force, I had a lot of people that, pushed me to be better. They were mentors, and some of them weren't necessarily the mentors that you want to have. The mentor helps you grow, through positive actions. Is sometimes the people who act badly, they are like a mentor too. They're teaching you
Mhm.
how not to be, and they're also teaching you to find your voice and to speak up and speak out.
Amen. That's true. That's true. And so, because I like that. That's a good point. Sometimes, when you said that, my husband made a point to say to me, even though someone did something bad and I thought it was just awful, he said, "So what did you learn from that?" I was like, at first I said nothing. He said, "No, no, no, no. You learn what not to do."
I sometimes thought that too. Nothing. I haven't got nothing out of this. But
But
you do.
yeah,
He's like,
you
yeah,
do.
yeah. He sounds like a coach, because we're taught that lessons, I mean, or experiences, you can learn from every single thing, good
Mhm,
and bad. I agree
mhm.
with your husband.
Yeah. Yeah, and so he is. He's very wise, very patient, very calm. So when he said that, and I think this was a couple of weeks ago, I was like, nothing. I don't like that. That wasn't nice, And I'm literally saying it like this. And so he said, no, no, no. He did his finger. No, no, no. You learn what not to do. So when you said that, I thought about what he said when you said, because sometimes we can learn from the people that maybe do some things maybe we don't need. No, that's not a good idea, but you learn what not to do. I love that. I love that. They
Yeah, and
teach
they help
you.
you. They can help you to find your voice. To set
Mhm,
boundaries,
mhm.
to have goals. I mean, there's so many good things if you have that mindset.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that. So when you went into the army, tell me about that experience. Let's talk about it because you talked to me before about being a whistleblower, and I know when you say that to me, I remember thinking, well, you're just being honest. I know they put the title on it as whistleblower, but you're being honest. So, and I know you were greatly impacted from that. Can you tell me and talk to us about what you went through and how that helped you become who you are today?
Sure, Kate. I have an Army last name, but I actually went in the Air Force, and it's easy to get them all,
Mhm,
in the same category. They're all great branches of service, and each one
mhm,
is specific to different roles and things like that. Well, when I was at E5, a staff sergeant, I'd say about a fourth of the way in my career, I spoke up against this chief master sergeant, and he was a high ranking chief, E9. Everybody knows what E9 is, if there are no veteran ranks and things like that. And this man was doing really bad things. He was married and he got one of the young ladies pregnant that worked in my division.
mhm,
And he tried to get me to go out with his friends, and they're all drinking, and uh, they were not the kind of people I wanted to be around. I'm not putting drinking down because people can drink responsibly, and
mhm,
social drink can be very enjoyable. But I was all into getting my college, making something better myself. I came from humble beginnings in North Florida.
mhm,
We didn't have much. Grew up in the second poorest county in Florida, Putnam County, Florida. Yep. You wouldn't think so. It's a beautiful area if you like water, lakes, rivers, and
mhm,
things like that. Just gorgeous. But I
mhm,
knew there had to be something more. And so when this chief, told me, if you don't go out with my buddies, if you don't do this and that, I'm going to go after you. And he did. I went on vacation while I'm coming back from North Alabama with my mom in the car. We went up to see family. I get this call from the man, my supervisor, who was underneath this chief, and he said, "Come in tomorrow at this time. Don't raise a stink. You're about to be fired." And I'm like, nobody gets fired in the Air Force, what have I done? And he goes, well, you pissed the chief off. And so sure enough, I got what you'd call a demotion, not in grade or rank, but I was
mhm,
at the headquarters working as a resource manager doing high level assignments like
mhm,
ROTC in the Air Force, Civil Air Patrol, uh, recruiting support, things like that. I mean, it's a special duty job. You have to be handpicked, and I was. So they put me down into this orderly room, personnel, and it was I mean, every job is important in the military, really, every single job. But it's definitely a demotion in responsibilities. And I stood up to this chief. I didn't think it was called whistleblowing at the time. And I
Mhm.
spoke up about the wrongdoing of this man. And everybody kept saying, "You can't touch this chief. You know, he's the leader of 5 different groups." And I'm like, I'm not trying to touch him. I'm just trying to restore my career, you know? And it took over a year and 200 interviews with people who worked with me. And they all came back and said, you know, the reason why Don got fired, because they said it was unprofessionalism. Everybody came back and said, no, this is somebody that's highly ethical, highly kind. And this,
Right.
he ended up losing a stripe, which when you're E9, that means it has to go to Congress for approval. And they demoted him. And then he was out of there. And I have to wrap it up with a real quick, good story. 2 or 3 years later, a friend of mine, we were both stationed at the Pentagon years ago,
Mhm.
and I was in my early 20s. And she called me, and her name's Michelle, and she said, "Are you sitting, Dawn?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sitting. What's up?" She says, "Well, I'm at the Senior NCO Academy right now in Colorado, and all of a sudden they're talking about your story about this E5 standing up to this E9, unethical." And my friend screams, and she's a little petite thing, a ball of
Mhm.
fire. "That's my friend. That's Don Westmoreland." So they're teaching ethics and they're talking about my story. I had no idea my story had gotten out there. You know, I did get a fair remedy. I was allowed to leave and go to Tyndall Air Force Base, which is Florida. The Panhandle is a wonderful assignment and such.
Mhm.
But I'm glad that I spoke up, and it's unfair that people put down whistleblowing, because you know, what if it was happening to you and you're standing up for yourself, and or you're standing up for others? Because I've done it before. Stood up for other people too.
I love it. I love it. And that every time you tell me about it, it's just I hear something different. I hear and I hear there's like growth in it. And I hear,
Oh,
you're proud and I'm proud of you. Thank you for standing up for
thank
yourself. Because a lot
you.
of times and as we go through things, we don't stand up for ourselves. I know I didn't initially. Now I do. Now I do. So, and I know you feel good about that. Did
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that I feel really, really good, you know, and I've even had people say, you know, some people will stand up for themselves. It's a rare person that stands up for themselves and others. And I thought,
Mhm.
I had this naive idea, Kate, that more people stood up for themselves and others. And
Right.
I'm like, huh.
A lot of people don't. A lot, especially people who are feel like they can't speak up or feel silenced or been through trauma and don't know how
Mhm.
to navigate through life going since they've been through that trauma. And I always tell people you're not what you've been through. It's supposed to, I feel like it's supposed to take you to the next level. You're not supposed to stay in that. So how did that impact you in as far as getting to the next level in your life after all of that happened?
Mm. Well, you know, it's like going to the gym, which I don't go to the gym as much in my early 60s as I did when I was much younger. You know,
Mhm.
if you're going to the gym to build your muscles, lose weight, you know, tone up, it doesn't happen in one time, right? It
Mhm.
probably didn't happen 2 or 3 times. But if you consistently work on exercising, you know, you're going to lose weight, build the
Right.
muscle, tone up, whatever your goals are. It's the same thing with resilience. So when I had other traumatic experiences, and I certainly have had a lot more and a lot worse than what happened in that experience, I was able to deal with these experiences easier. Not always, they were always easy, but it was easier because I had already built up to a certain level of resilience, and I had tools, and I had, you know, the resources, and then I had my people who I could reach out to. And I'm a firm believer in having counselors and having people hold you accountable.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. I thank you for that, Don. I thank you for your courage and your resilience. And, even when I came on your show, I felt welcome. I felt like, okay, we talked about things I didn't even think we were going to talk about.
Yeah, it's always like that. Well, I think we all have intuition, God-given
Mhm.
intuition, but I've just been in touch with it, and I just don't believe in scripting and writing 10 questions out and boring
No,
people to death and reading a long bio,
right.
because people want to know what is in it for me. You know, what's the final outcome? How can it help me?
Mhm. Right. I love that. I don't believe in script. You have to be authentic for me to be able to just be able to connect, I think. You have to be authentic in the world, just being authentic altogether. You know what I mean? Being honest and having integrity matters, you know?
Yeah,
So,
it does. In a world where there's a lot of non-integrity, there's a lot of dishonesty in our world. I don't want to focus on that, but there is.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And I brought that up for a reason, talking about being authentic and talking about having integrity, because I see a lot of that in you, in the things that you talk about, and the just the way that you carry yourself in your shows and everything. Can you talk to us about how you got, started, and what made you want to start doing the things that you do now outside of the
Mhm.
whistleblowing? Is other things that you said, is other thing that happened in your life. So I know that's not the only authentic thing. That's not the only impactful thing that you do.
Yeah. Well, I was, as you call it, a whistleblower. About in 2012, I spoke up about hiring practices because I had HR background. I have 33 years now, and but back then I had about 20 years, and I saw that there was racial discrimination within the veteran affairs, and the veteran affairs is much more than the hospitals. I mean, they have the finance portions, the revenue, and I was working in that. And I saw, nepotism, which in the government's the illegal hiring of family and friends. Spoke up because I noticed there were only 5 black. I think there were one black man and about 4 black women. 550 white folks like myself, and I'm like, what the heck? What's going on here? I quickly caught on. And one of my best friends today, I can say her name because she's out there and I'm have her permission. Angela Thomas. She was one of those 5 black employees. We both spoke up. We did different journeys. They went
Mhm,
after her. They went after me. Management retaliated, but she was working from home because of her disabilities. I was not allowed to work from home, even though I could have. So
mhm,
I got 14 charges of retaliation against me when I filed charges with the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And the reason why I went that route, it has to be disability, discrimination, sex, race, things like that. And I filed disability discrimination because I was not allowed to work from home, although I needed to work from home. And it was a computer based job. And I say work
mhm,
from home because I could control the air and I had some health issues and things like that. So it was part of retaliation. And I filed charges retaliation and they came after me more. Lost my home because they cut off my paycheck to punish me. I had to sell about 80% of my things. And I voluntarily, and I'm very authentic about this, I chose and I went to the Charles George VA in Asheville, North Carolina. I laid one of those 4 beds in the mental health ward for the women. At the time, there was only 4 beds.
mhm,
And I did that because I was exhausted. I was tired. My phone was being tapped. I was able to prove that later as such. When you sue the VA or any federal agency, you're suing the secretary of the veteran affairs. I mean, not him personally or her personally, but that's
understood.
what happened. My phone was tapped for almost 20 months and I was exhausted. I wasn't feeling safe. Third day in the mental health ward, even though I was on all this anti-anxiety medicine, anti-depression medicine, stuff to sleep and such, I saw myself in this metal mirror because they said, "You want to get a shower?" Heck yeah. I mean, I have this hospital gown on for 3 days. I haven't had a bath or shower. And
Mhm,
I'm almost running and skipping, Kate. And I see this metal mirror. Of course, it's not going to be glass. And I'm looking at it and who is this person? I'm
mhm,
looking at myself having a hate fest
mhm,
because I thought, you are weak. Look where you ended up. You end up in a mental health ward. You're weak. And, just beat myself up. And I didn't even recognize myself because I'm really pale skin and, there's purple triangles under my eyes. I'm from exhaustion. And then I heard this voice, this divine voice, and I was looking around, who is talking to me? It said, you're going through these experiences because, ooh, I'm getting chills.
mhm,
You're going through this experience because you're going to help a lot of people. And I'm like, what? something in me that day shifted. The next day, I said, I want to be out. Of course, you don't just get to walk out the doors. They have an interdisciplinary get together and they ask you a
Mhm.
thousand questions. They're like, she's ready. She's good.
Mhm.
I said, yeah, I'll admit, I felt weak. I was tired. I was exhausted. You saw me when I came in. I'm talking to all these psychiatrists and counselors and mental health people. I mean, there's like 7, 8 of us, you know. And I said, I am good. I said, I know what to do from here on.
Mhm.
I bought into the victimhood. I am not a victim anymore. I still had months ahead of me to stay strong with very little money because they cut my paycheck off. And I was
Right.
a much higher income. Yes, I had Air Force retirement, but I had a nice house I lost. And I moved forward and I was able to settle 2 days before the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's administrative judge come because they travel to your city. I'm
Mhm.
not kidding. And so I was able to settle with nothing but documentation, Kate. And everybody's, how did you do that? You know, word got out. I mean, I met one of the creators of Homeland Security, Tom, and if I gave you his last name, you couldn't find him anyway because people's like that, they're just not on the internet. And so
Yeah,
Tom had
he
in
given
between
up.
he was one of the creators of Homeland Security, a guy being in his mid 70s. He goes, I want to meet this girl. Who in the world stands up to these VA people, these VA Veteran Affair Hitlers? And
Mhm.
so I met him a couple times. I even met Erin Brockovich because I wanted to meet her, tell her about my story and interview her. I got to interview her about, I think 8 years, 7, 8 years ago. Really
Mhm.
neat lady. And I'm 5'10" and she's taller than me. So a lot of good things happened. Yes, there's a messy middle, but then people wanted to know, how did you do it? So then I wrote How to Stand Up to Workplace Bullying and Discrimination, which took 2 years to write because I was rear-ended and had a traumatic brain injury, which took 200 medical treatments to get me back to about 95, 99%. I don't know, real close. So
Mhm.
I knew all these things happened for a reason. What I went through, that's when I become a life coach about in 2014, wrote 2 books, The Empowered Whistleblower, about, my experience helping how other people can get their power. It was more of a
Yes.
spiritual faith-based book. And then the second one, again, How to Stand Up to Workplace Bullying Discrimination. Because I knew there were a lot of books out there, Kate, that
Yeah.
said bullying is bad, bullying, discrimination is bad. These are different kind. Nobody tells you exactly how to stand up to them, especially in the workplace, right?
Right.
So I did. I wrote a book.
I
And
love
it's
it.
on Amazon and it's anywhere, that they sell books. I wrote it and I even lowered the price so nobody out there should be able to afford it, because it's been out there for a couple years. And all the guidance I've ever given when I've worked with clients, I've done HR consulting now, been at 33 years. They're like, I don't know how to handle it. I don't know what to do. Well, first we got to figure out, is it bullying, which is not illegal, or is it discrimination? And
Right.
how to document. And a lot of people I've worked with, they've all succeeded if they followed the guidance I told them.
I love
They're
that.
brave
Well,
for doing it. They're
yeah.
very brave because some of them have spoken up about illegal things in their jobs.
I've done the same thing. One of my jobs, I had to file a case with the EEOC myself. We never got a chance to talk about it, so I know exactly what you mean when you. But that's where you find your strength and your courage. Knowing that it's for me. When I did, I was like, "That's not right. You're just not going to do this to me."
Right, right.
And so, did you feel empowered after it was all said and done? You went through everything that
Oh,
you've been
yeah.
through. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I felt a little cocky, and I had to, get the cocky out. I mean, you do kind of have a little ego and cocky when you're standing up to, it's a Goliath and David
Right.
story.
Yes.
You can't just be all nice and sweet. I'm not saying you have to be hateful. Did I do
That's
anything to
correct.
harm the enemy, the people acting like enemies? No.
Yeah.
But yeah, it blew people's wait a minute, you didn't have witnesses? Yeah, I had witnesses. I didn't bring them in because they were scared. They were
Right.
terrified. They knew what happened to me. I said, but if you document things and if it's done properly, Kate, then
Right.
mine was solid. In fact, the government, the VA wanted to make me sign a non-disclosure agreement. I'm like, nope, 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 nope.
I don't blame
We
you.
got down to the last day and they're like, okay, let's sign. Okay, we're not going to ask that anymore. Because I knew if I said, I'll agree to, sign your gag order, your non-disclosure agreement where I can't
Mhm.
talk about my story. How am I going to be able to share my story? Not everybody wants to hear about all the trauma I've been through. They want to know what is in it for them. How can it help them? Where I
Yes.
need guidance. And that's why I become a syndicated radio talk host. And I was honored to have you on the show recently.
Thank you for
It's
having
all about
me.
resilience.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for having the courage to stand up, because you standing up for yourself, you're standing up for others that's going to come behind you and have to do some of the same things that you've done. And I love that. I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. And I have to say one quick thing. My friend Angela Thomas, she went the EEOC route. It took her almost 5 years because they triaged it based off severity. Mine was pretty quick. It was within
Mhm.
20 months, my hearing. Uh, Hers took almost 5 years, and she had a very successful outcome. And she's out there empowering people too in her own way.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, we're gonna have to reach out to Miss Angela as well. And Don, thank you for being here. Don, you have really empowered me today. Every time I hear your story, you empower me, and you've empowered others. I want you to tell everyone what's the name of your books and where they can purchase your books so they can be empowered as well, even more.
Yeah, probably the most sought out is the second one, which is a workbook, and I wrote it in easy to understand style. That way, somebody doesn't have a lot of education can understand it. Even middle schoolers and high schoolers have read the book. So, How to Stand Up to Workplace Bullying and Discrimination is on Amazon, and you can find it other ways, but that's the best way. And the first one was The Empowered Whistleblower.
Mm-hmm.
That was about the spiritual path and the steps that I took and I shared. They can definitely find everything on Amazon to keep it simple.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Don, thank you for being a wonderful guest today. Until next time, you guys, this has been an episode of the Kate Thurman Show. Bye for now.